Hello everybody, this is going to be a fun one. Today we're looking at the classic, Destroy All Monsters. So the cool thing about this movie is we're kind of getting a big old family reunion of various kaiju throughout the years, even if they weren't in particular in the Godzilla series. So along with the ones that we already know, we're getting also Gorosaurus, we're getting Varan, Baragon. And even though two of those kaiju really didn't have a big role in this movie and they just kind of make appearances, it's still cool that they made an appearance in this movie. That said though, however, there were two key kaiju that were missing, and that would have to be Ebirah and King Kong. Unfortunately, they weren't able to make it to the party. It's really unfortunate that King Kong was not able to be part of this movie in retrospect. I can imagine that if he had been part of this movie, it could have possibly changed the complexion of the writing in this movie and how it would have been executed. Like, can you imagine King Kong and Godzilla working together to fend off all the forces that the aliens had opposed towards them? I think it really would have been interesting. But the thing is, though, about King Kong, unfortunately, though, Toho's rights had expired. So his last movie was King Kong Escapes. So at the end of the road for King Kong with Toho. However, though, there would be new doors opening up for King Kong in the 70s as King Kong ventures into a brand new era of his own movies. Meanwhile, Godzilla was getting the goodbye treatment. He was ready to ride up into the sunset and get his last movie. And this was supposed to be the ending for Godzilla for what it was going to be. Fortunately, we would get 7 more years out of Godzilla. We'd get some bad, we'd get some ugly, and we'd get some amazing. And unfortunately, the amazing would end the Showa era before Godzilla went ahead and went on this hiatus just for the time being from the 70s to at least 84. So it's really good that they decided to keep this running just a little bit longer, because I don't want to imagine Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla just never happening in the 70s. I mean, eventually the idea probably would have happened, but as everything happened and as all the cards fell, I think it's perfect. I like to say that Destroy All Monsters has created the bar for what it takes to make a Monster Mash Battle Royale movie. Overall, the formula and the idea of what this movie has laid out has been repeated with various different works like Godzilla Final Wars, which is probably the most notable movie that has reused this formula. Of course, we got Pipeworks and their Godzilla gaming series in the 2000s, and then after that in the late 90s, we had Godzilla the series, which had the Godzilla Monster Wars episodes, which pretty well just has the same exact premises. Now, I want to see this be revisited. Of course, Legendary in their Monsterverse, this kind of has to happen. I mean, we've seen how Disney was able to do the MCU. We've seen it applied, obviously here, Toho was able to make these standalone movies and bring everybody together and have this movie, so why not someday? I mean, Legendary should definitely do it. I mean, we just got this new movie that was announced that's coming out in 2024. We don't exactly know all the details of what this movie is going to have, but we can only hope that we're rolling and moving in the right direction to make a Legendary Monsterverse Destroy All Monsters happen. This movie is fun, but the thing is, there are things I want to nitpick. Now, this could be absolutely taboo depending on who you, the viewer, are, because some people, this movie is perfect, and definitely it is one of those movies that's considered to be the greatest of all time Godzilla movies. However, though, there's a few issues I have with it that I want to call out. That said, though, I'm not saying this is an absolute terrible movie, because it is definitely a bearable Godzilla movie that I can sit down and watch any day. With that said, let's talk about this movie and the fact that it jumps into some unexplored terrain for the first time in the Godzilla series. So this movie is set in an alternate universe, basically 1999, where even though this movie came out in 1968, it's set in the future, and this is the only Godzilla movie, to my knowledge, that has actually done this. By this point, humanity has achieved world peace. We're visiting space like every day. I mean, just like we go out to our car and drive it around on the streets, so that's a very common thing, space travel, and the monsters have been confined to Monster Island. With that said, this movie, it wastes no time because the monsters are pulled off the island mysteriously. They're showing up in key cities all around the globe, destroying various different cities and laying waste to everything in their path, and we've lost communication to Monster Island, trying to figure out what's going on. This movie, it does not put a lot of context in the beginning of what's happening. We just know bad things are happening. So it is very different in the sense to Godzilla vs. Monster Zero, where we kind of knew the full context of what was going on when the monsters started destroying the city. This one is just like, yeah, it just happens. It's just fast. And also, another thing I do want to say is this movie, like, in the first 10 minutes, I kid you not, everything just pops off. Like, this movie wastes no time. So, a few key footnotes about this movie. This is the first time that we see Mothra not under control of her twins or any of the natives. Like, they're not even seen in this movie. Like, no real context of where they are or what's going on with them. We just know in the future, and it's not seen in this movie. Number 2, this is the first and only Godzilla movie where Godzilla attacks New York City. I said that. Yes, I said that.
The New York attack was Godzilla. That's what only American experts claim, but our guys here have doubts.
This movie already feels very different than the movies prior to. Like, the last two were definitely a lot more lighthearted and just set on an island. This movie returns us back to the city, and we're getting aliens involved in this movie. In fact, it feels more at home with the 1962 to 1965 Godzilla movies. Also, like I did say, yes, there are aliens in this movie. They are obviously a big part of the invasion. How can you have a mass-scale invasion and not have aliens in this movie? So we have the Keylocks, who are basically just taking control of people and the monsters. They are responsible for all the monsters going missing on Monster Island. So definitely their aim next to the Exilians is very different. I mean, these Keylocks are just going all in with their invasion, like all around the globe. The overall idea is they want to distract people from Japan, though, because there's a lot of big plans of their own going on in that location. This movie, I really applaud the fact that it doesn't waste no time getting into the destruction, like all the mayhem going on. Like, that's one of my favorite things about this movie overall. And also, I want to give a big thumbs up to the fact that the soundtrack is a return to more classical bits, and it feels more like a Godzilla soundtrack. The last two movies were very different and more playful. Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster, that said, I still like that soundtrack. That is still a good one, despite the fact that it is very different, and sometimes different is good for what it's worth. But this movie, though, appropriately, if we're going to bring back all the kaiju, we got to have some classic bits and make this feel more at home as a classic Godzilla movie. So with all the destruction and the mayhem going on, the Keylocks are establishing their base underneath Mount Fuji. Now, to me, this is kind of peculiar and funny, because I feel like if you're an alien race, you don't want to establish your base underneath something that is just really notable to humans. I mean, this is a notable location on Earth. But for what it's worth, though, this isn't the only movie where aliens do something really stupid. I mean, Signs, the aliens invade Earth, which is predominantly water. And then after that, you have War of the Worlds, where the aliens did not take into account that possibly we have a virus that their bodies can't withstand. Independence Day, for example, they invade a planet and they don't take into account or have any antivirus system to defend from any man-made computer viruses. So this movie gets a pass, because this is just something that happens because plot purposes. So I won't dog on it too much, because I feel like if you just nail too many things on a movie, I feel like you're just not allowing yourself to have fun overall. So along with all the monsters gathered from Monster Island, of course King Ghidorah is involved in this. The Keylocks have control of King Ghidorah. Poor King Ghidorah. Every movie you're always under control of aliens. Aliens control you, and when they lose control of you, you just fly away. You want nothing to do with what's going on. I don't know, maybe King Ghidorah isn't such a bad guy. Maybe he's actually a reasonable guy. It doesn't really matter overall. Godzilla already hates him at this point. He already has past beef with King Ghidorah, so he's got to kill him.
Ghidorah is a space monster. The monsters from Earth cannot win.
5 minutes later.
Oh, no, my boy King Ghidorah is getting bodied. Oh my god, this is terrible. Look at King Ghidorah. His big bad masters have done a serious miscalculation. He is just getting wrecked. Half these monsters didn't even know who King Ghidorah was last week. But he shows up and Godzilla says, King Ghidorah. All the homies hate King Ghidorah. They all just brutally beat down on him. This poor head right here, trying to survive and gets hit by a smoke ring by Minya? This is humiliating. This is King Ghidorah. I'm sorry. Like, I mean, this is the one point I feel bad for King Ghidorah, because he is always just the guy that's in the wrong place at the wrong time, and this movie seriously is the real definition of that. Poor King Ghidorah. The savagery, the carnage. It doesn't end. Look at this guy also, too. He's doing commentary like it's freaking Monday Night Raw or something like that. Regardless of the fact that King Ghidorah does get bodied, we will see King Ghidorah in a future movie in this particular era. So, this movie, they kind of saved themselves, Toho, setting it in the future, due to the fact they can go ahead and bring King Ghidorah back, because Godzilla vs. Gigan was set at present time when it came out, so there's no continuity errors, really. It's just one of those things you kind of have to think about for a moment. Despite the fact that we have a lot of monster destruction and a lot of good shots, the issue is there is not a lot of fighting in it, really, though. You don't get to see a lot of kaiju matchups. Like, the final battle is in the last 20 minutes, which is kind of a bummer. Also, when you look at this on paper and kind of think about the idea of it, you're kind of like, wow, you can see a lot of cool matchups like Gorosaurus versus Godzilla. You can see Godzilla versus Baragon. You can see Mothra versus Kumonga. None of that happens. Unfortunately, monsters like Varan and Baragon, their suits were in terrible shape. They were lucky enough to make an appearance in this movie. So thank you for showing up in this movie, you two. I always appreciate that. It's just that, unfortunately, they didn't get to really do anything or contribute to anything going on in the movie other than just showing up. One kind of drawback in this movie is the sheer fact I feel like the ending to me was kind of underwhelming for me. I want to say this might be because of the fact I feel like I worked myself up a little bit as a viewer, so this might not apply to anybody else but me. But as a kid, when I saw the fire creature flying around, I was like, oh cool, we're going to see a new kaiju, something that is going to be destructive, just a relentless force that the squad won't be able to handle, and Godzilla's going to take on alone and come out victorious. Unfortunately, it's just a UFO. that is probably one of the most underwhelming aspects. I was hoping we'd see something new and original be introduced for this movie specifically. It just never happened. King Ghidorah's death in his battle is still fun. It seems like there could have been another payoff. Likely it wasn't in the budget. Don't let any of the negatives I've talked about also turn you away from this movie, because it is a fun ride for what it's worth. There are certain scenes where it does kind of slow momentum down, but overall though, it's one of those movies that I really want to see this idea explored again. And we've seen how the MCU has done things with the Avengers leading up to that in 2012. This movie obviously pioneered things for the ideas like that, and of course we want to see Legendary get back into it. Go ahead and check this movie out. It lives up to its title. It's unfortunate the next movie could not live up though. The next movie is by far the worst Godzilla movie of all time, so get ready for Godzilla's revenge.